Have you ever stopped to observe how some people seem to receive money, opportunities, and gifts with almost magical ease? They work, yes, but everything seems to flow naturally to them. And then you look at yourself. You work hard, maybe even harder than these people. You strive, dedicate yourself, do everything right. But still, there's always this feeling of struggling, forcing, like you're swimming against the current while others float with it. And the question that remains is, why? What's different? The answer isn't in how much you work. It's not in your skills or intelligence. The answer lies in something much deeper, something that operates in the shadows of your consciousness. It's in your capacity or incapacity to receive. Carl Jung, the famous Swiss psychologist who revolutionized our understanding of the human mind, identified something fascinating. He realized that many people carry, hidden in what he called the shadow of the unconscious, a devastating belief. This belief constantly whispers, even when you don't notice, "I don't deserve." And this isn't just a random phrase floating in your mind. It's deep programming, often installed in childhood, that silently controls how you relate to abundance, money, success, and even simple everyday compliments. This video you're watching now is the first episode of a complete series called The 7 Unconscious Blocks to Wealth. Throughout this series, we're going to dive deeply into the invisible patterns that sabotage your financial prosperity, always using Carl Jung's profound wisdom to illuminate the path. And today, in the first episode, we're going to talk about the fundamental block, the one that sustains all others, the inability to receive. Because you can work 100 hours a week, you can be the best at what you do, but if you unconsciously block the entry of abundance, it simply won't reach you. It's like planting a beautiful garden, watering it every day, caring for it lovingly, but having a high wall that prevents sunlight from entering. Without light, nothing grows. And without the capacity to receive, no wealth establishes itself. Let's start by understanding what this inability to receive really is. We're not talking about ingratitude. We're not talking about arrogance or thinking you deserve everything without doing anything. We're talking about something completely different. We're talking about a visceral, unconscious, automatic resistance that activates every time something good is about to enter your life. Observe yourself. When someone genuinely compliments you, saying you did amazing work, what's your first reaction? If you're like most people with this block, you immediately deflect. Oh, it was nothing. It was luck. Anyone would do the same. You can't simply accept the compliment, hold that moment of recognition, and say, "Thank you." Why? Because deep down, far below your consciousness, there's a voice whispering that you don't deserve that compliment. And if you don't deserve a simple compliment, how will you manage to receive money? How will you accept a promotion? How will you allow prosperity to enter your life? Jung would call this shadow, the shadow. The shadow isn't your bad side. It's simply everything you've rejected about yourself and pushed into the unconscious. And one of the most common things people reject is precisely their own worth, their own dignity, their own deservingness. As a child, you probably heard messages like, "Don't be selfish. Think of others first. You have to earn things." These phrases, said with good intention by your parents, teachers, by society, were internalized. And the unconscious interpretation you made was, "My needs don't matter. I only have value if I sacrifice myself for others. I need to constantly prove I deserve to exist." And thus was formed what Jung would call persona, the social mask. You created the persona of the good person, the one who gives, helps, sacrifices, never asks for anything, never bothers anyone. And beneath this persona, your true self, with legitimate needs, real desires, valid wants, was being suffocated. What you truly wanted, what you genuinely needed, all of this was pushed into the shadow because it didn't fit the image of the good person. And when you reject your own needs, when you push your right to receive into the shadow, what happens? You create an automatic pattern of refusal. Let me tell you Teresa's story. She worked at a company for 5 years, always competent, dedicated, respected by everyone. One day her boss called her and offered a significant promotion. It was a management position, a 40% salary increase, her own team to lead. Anyone looking from outside would say Teresa should have accepted immediately, celebrated this deserved achievement. But that's not what happened. Teresa said she needed to think about it. And that night she couldn't sleep. It wasn't excitement keeping her awake. It was paralyzing anxiety. Thoughts came like an avalanche. What if I can't handle it? What if they discover I'm not that good? What if I fail in front of everyone? But beneath all these fears was the core belief, the root of everything: I don't deserve this. They made a mistake choosing me. A week later, Teresa declined the promotion. The official justification was that it wasn't the right time in her life. But the real truth, the truth she would only discover 3 years later in therapy, was that she had sabotaged an incredible opportunity because unconsciously she believed she didn't deserve to be in that position. And today, watching colleagues with much less experience occupying positions that could have been hers, Teresa understands. Her problem was never working hard. Her problem was always receiving the fruits of that hard work. This pattern manifests in so many different ways. You deflect compliments as if they were attacks. You refuse help even when drowning in tasks, saying, "No need, I can manage alone." When someone gives you a gift, you feel a strange guilt as if you'd contracted a moral debt. You shouldn't have, you say, trying to minimize the person's kindness. When someone offers to pay your restaurant bill, you feel physical discomfort and insist on splitting it, or promise to pay next time. And when real opportunities for prosperity appear, a bigger project, a client willing to pay well, a chance to earn more, you find logical reasons not to accept. It's not the right time. I need to prepare more. It would be too much stress. But the unconscious reason is always the same: I don't deserve this. Now let's go deeper. Where does this belief come from? Because nobody is born believing they don't deserve. Babies and small children receive naturally. They don't question whether they deserve love, food, attention. They simply receive. So what happens? What happens is socialization. It's childhood. It's the messages you absorbed without critical filter because you were just a child trying to understand the world. You heard "don't be selfish," and unconsciously translated it as "your needs are wrong." You heard "think of others first," and interpreted it as "you come last always." You heard "you have to earn it," and concluded that your mere existence isn't enough. You heard "money doesn't bring happiness," and absorbed the idea that wanting prosperity is something superficial, wrong, greedy. Let me tell you about Anna. Anna grew up watching her mother constantly sacrifice herself for the family. Her mother worked 2 jobs but always said she was fine. When she got extra money, she spent it all on the children, never on herself. If someone offered help, she proudly refused. "No need, I can handle it." For child Anna, this seemed heroic, admirable. Her mother was seen as a warrior, a strong woman. And unconsciously, Anna learned a devastating equation: love equals sacrifice. Being valued equals having no needs. Being good equals giving without ever receiving. Fast forward 30 years. Anna is now a therapist, works with love and dedication seeing her patients. But there's a chronic problem. She charges values far below market rate. When she needs to reschedule a session because she's sick, she feels deep guilt as if she's abandoning people. When a client cancels at the last minute, she doesn't charge the cancellation fee because the person is already going through problems. Why does Anna do this? Because deep in her psyche is engraved that equation she saw in her mother. My value comes from how much I give, not how much I receive. It's the same pattern now reproduced automatically, unconsciously, a generation later. In a clinical supervision session, when asked why she charged so little, Anna started crying. "I feel selfish charging more," she confessed. "I feel like I'm taking advantage of people's vulnerability." The supervisor asked a question that changed everything. "And when you give without receiving adequately, are you really helping these people? Or are you repeating a martyrdom pattern you saw in childhood, a pattern that left your mother exhausted and resentful?" It was a painful but necessary awakening. Anna needed to see that what she called generosity was actually self-sabotage disguised as virtue. Jung teaches us that when a child absorbs these messages repeatedly, they don't have critical capacity to question them. They simply accept them as absolute truths about how the world works and about who they are. And then a complex psychic structure forms. First, you develop the persona, the mask of the good person, that identity you show the world. Second, you create a shadow where you throw everything that doesn't fit this persona, including your legitimate needs, your real desires, your right to receive. Third, your ego adapts and creates a survival strategy. If I give enough, if I sacrifice enough, maybe one day I'll prove I deserve to receive something back. And thus begins a perfect vicious cycle. You give compulsively, unconsciously hoping to prove your worth. But when something good finally comes, when someone offers something to you, the shadow immediately whispers, "You don't deserve this." And you reject, sabotage, minimize. This rejection confirms the original belief that you really don't deserve, and the cycle restarts stronger than before. Now let's talk specifically about money, because this is where this block causes the greatest damage. When the inability to receive meets money, it manifests in very specific and very destructive patterns. The first pattern is systematically undercharging. You offer your work, your time, your expertise for values far below what it's really worth. And when someone suggests you raise your prices, you feel visceral discomfort in your stomach. Why? Because charging adequately would be declaring to the world and to yourself, "I deserve this value." And if you don't believe this at the unconscious level, you'll find 1,000 conscious justifications to charge less. People don't have money to pay more. I'm not that good yet. Who am I to charge these values? It would be greedy of me. All these justifications are just conscious rationalization of an unconscious belief of unworthiness. The second pattern is rejecting lucrative opportunities. A real chance to earn more appears in your life. It could be a bigger project, a client willing to pay well, a promotion, a business opportunity. And you, instead of embracing this chance, find reasons not to accept. And these reasons always seem so logical, so reasonable. It's not the right time now. I'll wait until I'm more prepared. It would be too much stress in my life. But if you're honest with yourself, if you look really deep, you'll see the unconscious truth beneath all these justifications. I don't deserve this level of prosperity. I'm not ready for this success. The third pattern is immediately spending everything you receive. You get a bonus at work, receive a larger payment, inherit some money. And suddenly, in record time, that money disappears. Not necessarily on frivolous things or frivolities. Actually, it's usually on urgent needs that magically appear as soon as the money arrives. The car breaks down. The refrigerator stops working. A family emergency arises. Why does this happen? Because accumulating money, saving wealth, having abundance would mean accepting that you deserve to have more than the basics. And this would directly confront your unconscious belief. So the unconscious, creatively and automatically, finds ways to return the money to the universe, keeping you at the familiar level of scarcity, in the place where you unconsciously believe you belong. Let me tell you about Livia. Livia was a clinical psychologist, specialized in trauma. Exceptional professional, dedicated, with years of training, master's degree, specializations. Her patients had profound transformations working with her. But Livia had a very curious and very revealing pattern. Whenever a session was particularly good, when the patient had a revolutionary insight, cried healing tears, transformed something fundamental, Livia felt she shouldn't charge so much for that session. Sometimes she literally returned part of the money. Look, this session was so important for you, I know you're going through a lot financially, take half the value back. Other times she offered extra free sessions to compensate. In her conscious mind, this was empathy, it was humanity, it was genuine care. But when Livia started her own Jungian analysis, she discovered something that shocked her deeply. She discovered that she unconsciously believed that truly helping someone and receiving money for it were mutually exclusive, incompatible things. Where did this belief come from? From Livia's religious childhood, where she had learned that the things of the spirit are not for sale. In her unconscious, helping people was sacred, pure, spiritual. Charging money was profane, dirty, mundane. So if she really helped someone deeply and meaningfully, charging money for it would contaminate that sacred moment. The problem with this beautiful and well-intentioned belief? Livia was always in terrible financial difficulties. She worked 50-60 hours a week but could barely pay her basic bills. And the cruel paradox, the paradox Jung teaches us to recognize, the more Livia donated her work, the more she sacrificed herself financially, the more resentful she became. More exhausted. More irritated. less present in the sessions themselves. She was destroying her own capacity to help people because of a belief that helping and receiving were incompatible. It took months of deep work for Livia to integrate what Jung would call the shadow. She needed to accept that she could do sacred, deep, transformative work and receive abundantly for it. That, in fact, when she valued herself adequately, when she charged what she deserved, she had more energy, more presence, more real capacity to help her patients. Jung teaches us that the shadow doesn't contain only our bad or negative aspects. The shadow also holds our unclaimed gold, our rejected light, our unassumed power. When you reject your own worthiness, when you refuse to accept that you have intrinsic value, that you deserve prosperity, you're throwing pure gold into the shadow. And this shadowy gold always finds ways to manifest, but in distorted and destructive ways. You sabotage opportunities that appear. You systematically charge less than you're worth. You lose money in mysterious impulsive spending. You attract situations that repeatedly confirm, "I don't deserve." And here's the fundamental Jungian insight. Integrating the shadow doesn't mean forcing yourself to believe you deserve. It's not empty positive affirmation. It's bringing to full consciousness the belief that you don't deserve, looking at it with compassion and curiosity, understanding exactly where it came from, seeing how it was formed in childhood, recognizing it was a child's attempt to make sense of the world. And then, with this compassionate understanding, you can consciously choose a new truth. But here's something that needs to be said, something that goes against everything you probably learned about generosity and goodness. Giving without being able to receive is not virtue. Giving without being able to receive is self-sabotage disguised as nobility. Think about this logically for a moment. If you only give and never receive, eventually you deplete. You literally have nothing more to give. So your generosity has a built-in expiration date. It's unsustainable by definition. But deeper than logic, Jung teaches us about reciprocity as a fundamental law not just of the psyche but of the universe. Giving and receiving are two movements of the same cycle, two phases of the same cosmic breath. Blocking one is blocking the other. It's like deciding you'll only exhale but never inhale because inhaling would be selfish, would be taking air other people could use. You die in minutes. Life is exchange. Life is flow. Life is giving and receiving in dynamic balance. Let's make a crucial distinction here. Real generosity, true generosity, comes from a place of internal abundance. You give because you overflow, because you have more than you need, because it's natural for you to share. And this real generosity doesn't expect external validation, doesn't need constant recognition, can receive with the same ease and naturalness with which it gives, is sustainable long-term because it comes from a well that renews itself, and never generates resentment because there's no sacrifice involved. Now compare this with neurotic sacrifice, which is what most people confuse with generosity. Neurotic sacrifice comes from a place of internal emptiness. You give trying to fill this void, trying to prove your worth, trying to buy love or approval. This type of giving desperately needs recognition to validate that you're a good person. And when someone tries to reciprocate, tries to give something back to you, you automatically refuse because receiving would break the entire dynamic. You deplete quickly because you're giving from an empty well. And eventually, inevitably, you generate bitterness and deep resentment, even if you don't consciously admit this to yourself. Let me tell you about Paolo. Paolo had a huge heart. Everyone who knew Paolo talked about his generosity. Whenever someone needed financial help, Paolo was there. Friend needing money to pay a bill? Paolo lent without thinking twice. Family member going through difficulty? Paolo helped. Charity asking for donation? Paolo donated. He was known as that friend you could always count on. The problem, the big and devastating problem, was that Paolo never had money for himself. He worked as an architect, earned well, had solid income, but constantly lived on the financial edge. Wanted to take vacation and travel? Couldn't, had given the vacation money to help someone. Wanted to take a specialization course to advance in career? Impossible, the money went to a third party's emergency. And here was the most revealing pattern of all. When someone tried to reciprocate Paolo's kindness, when they tried to pay back a loan, offer help, give a gift, Paolo refused emphatically, almost offended. No need, keep that money for yourself. It was a pleasure to help, you don't need to reciprocate. Don't worry, I didn't do this expecting anything back. At 45, Paolo had a complete collapse. Total exhaustion, physical and emotional depletion. And worse, he began to feel deep resentment toward the same people he always helped, the people who always came asking. And then came shame for the resentment. How could he feel anger toward these people if he was the generous person? Did this make him a horrible, hypocritical person? It was in therapy that Paolo finally understood. He wasn't being generous. He was using compulsive giving as a desperate attempt to prove his worth. The core belief that dominated Paolo's entire life was, I only have value if I'm useful to other people. So he gave, constantly trying to prove he deserved to exist, that he deserved to occupy space in the world. And refusing to receive was an essential part of this sick pattern because staying always in the role of giver, never receiver, kept alive the belief, I don't deserve for myself, I can only give to others. Paolo's transformation began when he had a revolutionary insight. Allowing other people to give to him wasn't selfishness. It was allowing them to also experience the joy of giving, it was honoring human reciprocity, it was allowing life's natural flow. Jung observed that the human psyche operates in patterns of natural compensation. When there's prolonged imbalance in any direction, the unconscious eventually forces a correction, and this correction usually comes painfully, dramatically through crises and collapses. If you only give and never receive, several things inevitably happen. First, resentment grows inside you, even if you vehemently deny it to yourself and others. Second, your vital energy progressively decreases until you enter complete burnout. Third, your relationships become fundamentally unbalanced, with you always in the savior role and others in the dependent role. Fourth, and perhaps most important for our money theme, abundance can't flow because you've blocked the entrance. Jung would say you've created a unilateral and pathological identification with the giver archetype. But healthy archetypes always have complementary polarities. The healthy giver needs the integrated receiver. Without the receiver, without the capacity to also receive, the giver inevitably transforms into martyr. And martyrs aren't happy. Martyrs are resentful. But here's the good news, the really good news that will bring real hope. The capacity to receive isn't something you need to create from scratch. It's not something you need to invent or build. It's something you need to remember, rediscover, unearth from where it was buried. All small children know how to receive naturally, instinctively, without guilt or hesitation. A baby receives love, receives care, receives food, and simply accepts all of this as natural. It was only through socialization, cultural messages, childhood experiences that this capacity was unlearned. And what was unlearned can be relearned. You can train the muscle of receiving again. And like all training, you start small, with simple exercises and gradually increase. The first exercise is simple but surprisingly difficult. Accept compliments without automatic deflection. Next time someone genuinely compliments you, observe with total attention what your first impulse is. It will probably be to deflect, minimize, redirect. Oh, it was nothing special. It was luck. You're exaggerating. So-and-so helped a lot too. Observe this impulse, feel it in your body, recognize the anxiety that arises. And then, consciously, deliberately do something different. Stop. Breathe. Look at the person. And simply say, thank you. Nothing more. Just, thank you with a genuine smile. It will be uncomfortable at first, you can be sure of that. It will seem strange, maybe even arrogant in your perception. This discomfort you feel is literally the shadow of unworthiness being confronted. It's the belief, I don't deserve, being challenged. Feel this discomfort. Recognize it. But practice anyway. Because each time you accept a compliment without deflecting, you're strengthening the muscle of receiving, you're telling your unconscious, I can accept good things about myself. The second exercise is receiving gifts, favors, and kindnesses without automatic guilt. When someone offers you something, it could be a physical gift, it could be offering to pay a bill, it could be offering practical help. Carefully observe the three internal reactions that will probably arise. First, guilt. You shouldn't have done this. It was too expensive. Now I owe you something. Second, the impulse to immediately compensate. Next time I'll pay. Let me give you something back right away, I'll reciprocate this. Third, the narrative of unworthiness. Why are you doing this for me? I don't deserve so much kindness. Observe these three reactions without judgment, just recognizing they're there. And then, instead of acting from them, practice something radical. Receive fully. Feel the joy the person is having giving to you. Allow them to experience the pleasure of being generous. Say sincerely, "Thank you so much, this means a lot to me." And then stop. Don't minimize by saying, "You shouldn't have." Don't promise immediate reciprocation. Just receive. Let the cycle complete naturally. Allow that moment of generosity to be complete in itself. The third exercise is replacing sorry with thank you whenever possible. This is subtle but incredibly powerful. Observe how many times a day you apologize completely unnecessarily. Someone helps you with something and you say, "Sorry to bother." Someone waits for you a few minutes and you say, "Sorry for the delay." Someone listens to you vent and you say, "Sorry for talking so much." In each of these cases, you're operating from an energy of, "I'm a burden, I'm a bother, I shouldn't occupy space." Try substituting with gratitude. Thank you for helping. Thank you for waiting. Thank you for listening. Feel the difference? When you say thank you instead of sorry, you're honoring the other person's kindness instead of diminishing your own existence. You're recognizing their gesture instead of positioning yourself as a problem. This small change in language creates a big change in energy, both internal and in the relationship. Let me tell you about Sophia because her story perfectly illustrates how these exercises work in practice. Sophia was a graphic designer, talented, creative, with an exceptional eye for aesthetics. But she had the classic pattern of chronically undercharging. When she started practicing the receiving exercises, she was extremely skeptical. How will accepting a compliment change anything in my financial life? She thought with disbelief. But she decided to try anyway, more out of curiosity than real hope. In the first week, every time a client complimented her work, instead of automatically saying, "Oh, it was quick, it was nothing much," she paused and just said, "Thank you." She felt her face burn, felt the physical discomfort in her stomach, but kept practicing. Second week, a friend offered to pay for their lunch. Sophia, who always obsessively split every bill to the last cent, felt the very strong impulse to insist on paying half, but remembered the exercise, took a deep breath, and said, "Thank you so much, that's very kind of you," and simply let her friend pay, feeling the wave of discomfort but not acting from it. Something strange and wonderful began to happen over the following weeks and months. As Sophia practiced receiving small things, compliments, favors, everyday kindnesses, she noticed a subtle but profound change happening inside her. The constant voice that always said, "You don't deserve," was getting quieter, less insistent. It was as if the volume of this internal critical voice was being gradually turned down. In the third month of practice, a potential client asked her rate for a big project, the type of project that would normally leave her in panic. Sophia felt the old and familiar impulse arise to charge less, to secure the client, to not seem greedy, to be fair. But this time something was fundamentally different. She had spent months practicing receiving in small things. Compliments, favors, gifts, bills paid. And gradually, so gradually she had barely noticed, the muscle of "I can receive" was being strengthened. So Sophia quoted her real value, the fair market value for that type of project. No apologies. No elaborate justifications. No minimizing the work's complexity. The client accepted without hesitation, didn't even haggle. And Sophia had a revelation. It wasn't that she first needed to believe she deserved large amounts of money. It was that she needed to relearn to receive, starting absolutely small, practicing in low-risk situations, until receiving became natural again, until the innate capacity to receive was restored. Now let's talk about the Jungian concept of allowing flow, because this will connect everything we've discussed so far. Think about your breathing for a moment. You inhale, bringing oxygen into the body. You exhale, releasing carbon dioxide out. It's a continuous, automatic cycle, absolutely essential for life. Now imagine you decide, for some distorted philosophical reason, "I'm going to only exhale, never inhale, because inhaling would be selfish, would be taking air other people could use. Ridiculous, right? Absurdly obvious. You die in a few minutes. Giving and receiving work with exactly the same dynamic. They're two complementary movements of the same life cycle. Giving is like exhaling. Receiving is like inhaling. Blocking one is blocking the entire system. It's creating stagnation. It's creating death instead of life. When you systematically block the capacity to receive, several things happen simultaneously at the energetic and practical level. First, you're sending a clear signal to the universe, to reality, to the field of possibilities. I'm not ready for abundance, not prepared to receive more. And the universe, in a totally impersonal way, simply responds to this signal. Second, people around you gradually stop offering things to you because they learn, consciously or unconsciously, that you always refuse. Why keep offering if you always say no? Third, opportunities stop appearing or you stop recognizing them when they appear because your energy is in blocking mode, not in receptivity mode. Fourth, and perhaps most important for Jung, synchronicities are completely blocked. Jung spoke extensively about synchronicity, meaningfully connected events that have no obvious causal relationship. Impossible coincidences that change your life. The right person appearing at the right time. The perfect opportunity arising exactly when you need it. But synchronicity requires deep receptivity. Requires you to be open, to be in a state of allowing. If you're constantly in, I don't deserve to receive, mode, if you're blocked in the inability to accept good things, synchronicities can be happening literally around you but you can't see them, can't recognize them, can't accept them even when they knock on your door. Let me tell you about Ricardo, an extremely talented web developer. Ricardo mastered several programming languages, created elegant solutions to complex problems. His clients loved working with him. But Ricardo had a very specific pattern. He systematically charged less than the market paid for developers at his level. When questioned, he always said, I charge what I think is fair. But fair, in Ricardo's mind, meant less than his work was really worth. The practical result? Ricardo worked 60, sometimes 70 hours a week, but could barely cover his basic expenses. He lived in constant financial stress, chronically tired, without time or energy to study new technologies, without money to invest in update courses. And worst of all, he was starting to deeply hate what he did, was losing passion for programming because it had become associated with struggle and scarcity. One day, an experienced mentor said something to Ricardo that completely changed his perspective. Ricardo, when you chronically undercharge for your work, you're not being humble or fair. You're blocking the flow. You're actively preventing money from circulating through you. And when money can't flow through you, when you block it at the entrance, it stops coming to you completely. Ricardo didn't understand immediately, so the mentor continued explaining. Think about it, if you charged adequately for your work, you'd work much fewer hours. You'd have real time to study and improve yourself. You could invest in better tools. You could hire other professionals to help you on parts of the project. You could have energy and health to do even better work. Money would circulate through you, going to courses, to tools, to other professionals, creating prosperity throughout the chain. But the way it is now, you're holding money, blocking it right at the entrance, creating stagnation instead of flow. It was a revolutionary insight for Ricardo. He began slowly and gradually to increase his rates. And something absolutely fascinating happened, something he never would have believed if he hadn't experienced it directly. The more he charged adequately, the more he really allowed himself to receive fair value for his work, the more high-quality clients started appearing. It was as if the universe had been waiting for him to take this step, waiting for him to value himself, waiting for him to be ready to receive. Ah, now you're ready, the universe seemed to say. Now you're open. Now you allow. So let's send more, let's send better. Jung deeply understood that psyche and energy are fundamentally connected, intertwined. When you block receiving at the psychological level, you create a corresponding constriction at the energetic level. It's exactly like squeezing a garden hose. The water that symbolizes abundance can no longer flow. But when you allow receiving, when you really open this capacity, several things happen simultaneously. You open the energetic channel. Energy can start circulating freely again. More can come because you're demonstrating, through your receptivity, that you can handle it, that you're ready. And synchronicities, these meaningful coincidences Jung studied so much, begin appearing with increasing frequency. And here's the most counterintuitive part, most difficult to accept but also most liberating. You don't need to deserve to allow flow. You just need to be receptive. The tree doesn't deserve the rain that falls on it. The tree is simply open to receive the rain. And by being open, by being receptive, it grows, blooms, bears fruit. Now, before we close, I want to leave you with something to reflect deeply on. I want to leave you with a question that can change everything if you really sit with it, if you allow it to penetrate beyond the surface of your conscious mind. The question is this: what would become possible in your life if you really allowed yourself to receive fully? Not in some distant future when you finally deserve more, or when you finally prove your worth. No, today. What would become possible if you simply opened your hands, opened your heart, opened your energy and said with total sincerity, yes, I can receive. Yes, I allow. Yes, I accept. Because the fundamental truth, the truth Jung spent his entire life trying to make people understand, is that you don't deserve abundance because of what you do. You don't deserve because of how much you work. You don't deserve through performance or effort or sacrifice. You deserve abundance simply for existing. Just as the tree deserves sunlight not for doing something special, but simply for being a tree. Just as the ocean deserves rain not for proving its worth, but simply for being ocean. You deserve to receive not because you're special or superior, but because you're part of this universe that is, in its most fundamental essence, abundant. This was the first episode of The 7 Unconscious Blocks to Wealth. Throughout this series, we're going to explore each of the 7 main blocks that prevent people from prospering financially, always using Carl Jung's profound wisdom to illuminate the path. If this video resonated with you, if something said here struck a true chord inside you, I need you to do a few things. First, leave your like on this video because it really helps more people find this content, helps the algorithm show this to those who need to hear exactly this message. Second, and this is perhaps even more important, I want you to write in the comments answering this question. What do you have most difficulty receiving? Is it compliments? Is it practical help? Is it money? Is it opportunities? Is it love? Be honest. Be vulnerable. Let's create here a community of real honesty and genuine transformation, not pretense and social masks. And third, subscribe to the channel because next week we're going to talk about the second unconscious block to wealth. The comparison that steals your joy and completely paralyzes your action. Until then, practice receiving. Even if it's uncomfortable. Especially if it's uncomfortable. Because discomfort is the sign you're growing, that you're confronting the shadow, that you're integrating rejected parts of yourself. You deserve prosperity. You deserve abundance. Not because you earned it or proved it. You deserve it because you exist.
If this resonated with you, subscribe to the Shadow Dialogue and hit that like button. Your transformation starts with one click. See you in the next video.